And now with this breaking news, where America is under attack. A series of explosions trembled New York and Washington early morning today. Both of World Trade Center towers in Manhattan collapsed following two planes of jumbo jet size crashing into them. On the other hand, other U.S. vital establishments have come under attacks, like a portion of Pentagon that collapsed, the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. Bush, congressionals, and leaders went into unenclosed areas. The explosions have resulted in thousands of deaths and injuries that led to a state of horror all over the United States. Our correspondent Ali Khatib prepared to you this following report. Ali.
Since the Bay of Pigs crisis of 1961, the United States of America has not seen another one that could shock the political and economical life of the Americans. Today, an unanticipated attack aimed at the United States' biggest cities of Washington and New York, as an unidentified plane collided itself with the International Trade Center, known for being the largest trade center in the world. Less than 18 minutes later, another airliner, Boeing 767, crashed itself with the second tower of the International Trade Center. The first comments by the FBI referred that the airliners were hijacked from Boston Airport. Political centers were also targets to those who opposed the U.S. policy, as another airplane hit itself on the building of the White House. Meanwhile, a fourth plane chose the United States Pentagon to be its target. The developments stretch to the limits of full alert and tightened security measures never known before in the United States history. The series of explosions reached most of the United States centers of power, and despite all this chaos inside Washington, there was nothing for the United States President to say to his people, except to have a moment of mourning. On the other hand, many government buildings have been evacuated, fearing from any anticipated attack. One may conclude that violence breeds violence.
President Saddam Hussein met with Deputy Premier, Minister of Military Manufacturing, Mr. Abdel Tawab Al-Mullahwesh, and a number of officers, engineers, and researchers in the Military Manufacturing Board. At the meeting, the attendants conveyed greetings from their colleagues in the board to His Excellency President Saddam Hussein. For his part, President Saddam Hussein hailed the board's personnel spirit of cooperation and their innovations, and asked them to convey his greetings to their families and colleagues. Commenting on the attacks in Washington and New York, the President said that America is reaping what it had sowed, because America has took the lives of many people in the world, and its criminal acts have reached all places in the world, whether in Japan or what it had done in Vietnam or Iraq, and what it had done also against the Russian nuclear submarine. America is continuing its criminal acts till now by supporting the Zionist criminal acts against the people of Palestine. So, will the people of America save themselves and the whole world from the evils of the American rulers and their terrorist crimes against the world? Or will the rulers of America convert the feelings of Americans into new terrorist plans against the world to serve evils of the Zionists? Let the people of America remember that throughout history, nobody crossed the Atlantic carrying weapons to threaten America, but it is the one that crossed the Atlantic carrying with it death and destruction to the whole world. The President added, "Who does not want to reap evil must not sow it, and who considers the lives of his people precious must remember that the lives of the people in the world are precious also." The President concluded that the Americans must remember all of that, and if it will do so, then it will save its security and the security of the world from its rulers' acts. And Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Mr. Hikmat al-Azzawi, expressed Iraq's proudness of the Palestinians who are defending their just rights. During his reception to the Palestinian Minister of Finance, Mr. Mohammed Zuhdi al-Nashashibi, and Minister of Industry, Mr. Saadi al-Karans. During the meeting, Mr. al-Azzawi said that it is the responsibility of all Arabs to back the Palestinian uprising to liberate the whole of Palestine. The two Palestinian ministers hailed the Iraqi steadfastness against the aggressive plots committed against the Americans. And finally, the U.S. Department of Defense announced that all its troops and military installations around the world are in full state of alert in the wake of many attacks that targeted New York and Washington. The U.S. Naval Force said that 2 American aircraft carriers were stationed near the eastern coast of the United States and are on full state of alert. The U.S. President George W. Bush announced last night that all U.S. troops are in step-up condition after 3 hijacked airliners clashed into vital American installations in Washington and New York. Meanwhile, the mayor of New York announced that hundreds of firefighters are missing in the rescue operations. And in the United States, rescue teams are still searching for dead bodies or survivors under the rubble of the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington. The mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, announced today that about 3,700 persons counted missing after the attack on the Twin Tower buildings. On the other hand, the U.S. Secretary of Transport announced that civil aviation will resume today by commercial and private planes, with the reopening of the airports for emergency flights. The Palestinian Authority condemned the massacres committed by the Zionist occupation troops against the Palestinian people in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip. In a bulletin released by the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinians accused the Zionist entity of using the world attention being preoccupied with the series of attacks that targeted the United States to escalate their military aggression against the Palestinian people. The Zionist troops' aggression that targeted the occupied Arab lands resulted in the martyrdom and injury of dozens of Palestinians, particularly in Jenin, Ariha, and Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. And the Muslims of East Village in Lower Manhattan were harassed a number of Americans who called for revenge outside the Islamic Council Mosque in America. This incident aroused tension among the Muslims in the area, especially when the police did not offer anything mentioned. While in the name of freedom, a group of Americans left banners calling for revenge from the Muslims in America. On the other hand, American police started detaining a number of Arab and Muslims living in America under the allegations of interrogating them. And the Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf met today with his army commanders to discuss the issue of cooperation request with the United States concerning the latter's request to carry out military attack against the Saudi Osama bin Laden bases. Washington claims that bin Laden has connection with the attacks that targeted Washington and New York last Tuesday. An official Pakistani spokesman reported that the army commanders are negotiating U.S. requests in Rawalpindi, where their military headquarters.
President Saddam Hussein addressed today an open letter to the American and Western peoples and governments. My colleague Tharwat Al-Ani is going to deliver the complete letter of President Saddam Hussein.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. An open letter from Saddam Hussein to the American peoples and the Western peoples and their governments. Once again, we would like to comment on what happened in America on September 11, 2001, and its consequences. The comments we made on the next day of the event represent the essence of our position regarding this event and other events. But the aftermath of what happened in America and the West in particular, and in the world in general, makes it important for every leader to understand the meaning of responsibility towards his people, his nation, and humanity in general, to follow up the development of the situation, to understand the meaning of what is going on, and hence to elaborate his country's and people's position so as not to restrict oneself to only following the event. When the event took place, Arab rulers and rulers of countries whose religion of their people is Islam rushed to condemn the event. The Westerners rushed within hours to make statements and adopt resolutions, some of which are dangerous ones, in solidarity with America and against terrorism. Even before being sure, Western governments decided to join their forces to the America, even if that meant declaring war on the party that will be proved to have been involved in what happened. It is only normal to say that by the explanation of the present situation, as it has been said, or by comparison to the action previously taken by America against specific countries, it could be enough for some of the executors of the operation to have come from a country named by America, or said to have instigated the operation for the American military retaliation on what they call an aggression. We don't know if they would do the same thing, whether any of the planners and executors of the operation were found to have lived or held the nationality of a Western country, or whether the intention and the designs are already made against an Islamic party. It is most probable from the beating of media war drums that America and some Western governments are targeting a party who won't be but Muslim. The event that took place in America is an extraordinary event. It is not a simple one. According to figures announced by official American sources or by what has been spread by the media, the number of victims is great. Nobody has any doubts or denies that America and the West have the capabilities to mobilize force and use it to inflict destruction and on others on the basis of simple doubts or even whimsically, and can send their American missiles and the NATO fighters to wherever they want to destroy and harm whoever America decides to harm in a fit of anger, by greed, or by being pushed by Zionism. Many countries of the world have suffered from America's technology, might, and many peoples do recognize that America had killed thousands or even millions of human beings in their countries. We continue President Saddam Hussein's open letter to the American peoples and the Western peoples and their governments. The event that took place in America was an extraordinary one. It is not a simple event. It is the first time that someone crosses to America to unleash the fire of his anger inside it, as indicated by what was said by the media on the hypothesis that the executors of this act came from abroad. Since this event is unprecedented, is it wise to deal with it by precedent methods that can be used by whoever has the technical and scientific capacities of America and the West? If the target and the aim is one or more Islamic countries, as it has been said by the media and the intelligence services of some Western countries, this would only fall in the same direction that America and the West have always taken by targeting their fire on wherever they want to experiment a new weapon on. We ask again, America's targeting the fire of its weapons on specific targets and harming it or destroying it with the support of Western governments and of a fabricated story, would it solve the problem? Would this bring security to America and the world? Or isn't the use by America and some Western governments of their fire against others in the world, including or in the forefront of whom the Arabs and the Muslims, is one of the most important reasons of the lack of stability in the world at the present time? Isn't the evil inflicted on America in the act of September 11, 2001, and nothing else is a result of this and other acts? This is the main question, and this is what the American administration, along with the Western governments or the Western public opinion, should answer in the first place with serenity and responsibility, without emotional reaction and without the use of the same old methods that America used against the world. On September 12, 2001, we said that no one crossed the Atlantic to America carrying weapons before this event, except the Westerners who established the United States of America. America is the one who crossed the Atlantic carrying arms of destruction and death against the world. Here we want to ask a question. Wasn't the use of American weapons, including the nuclear weapon against Japan, enough before September 11, 2001 for America to prepare to use it in a heavier and a stronger way? Or isn't using it in an irresponsible way and without justification, as does any oppressive force in the world, is what made America the most hated country in the world, starting from the third world to the medium world and passing to the civilized world, as is the world divided by the West and America. The national security of America and the security of the world could be attained if the American leaders and those who beat the drums for them among the rulers of the present time in the West or outside the West become rational. If America disengages itself from the evil alliance with Zionism, which has been scheming to exploit the world and plunge it in blood and darkness by using America and some Western countries. What the American peoples need mostly is someone who tells them the truth, courageously and honestly as it is. They don't need fanfares and cheerleaders. If they want to take a lesson from the event so as to reach a real awakening in spite of the enormity of the event that hit America. But the world, including the rulers of America, should say all this to the American peoples so as to have the courage to tell the truth and act according to what is right and not to what is wrong and unjust, to undertake their responsibilities in fairness and justice, and by recourse to reason, passion, according to the spirit of chance and capability. In addition, we say to the American peoples, what happened on September 11, 2001 should be compared to what their government and their armies are doing in the world. For example, the international agencies have stated that more than 1.5 million Iraqis have died because of the blockade imposed by America and some Western countries, in addition to the tens of thousands who died or are injured in the military action perpetrated by America along with those who allied with it against Iraq. Hundreds of bridges, churches, mosques, colleges, schools, factories, palaces, hotels, and thousands of private houses were destroyed or damaged by the American and Western bombardment, which is ongoing even today against Iraq. Even you replay the images of the footage taken by the Western media itself of this destruction, you will see that they are not different from the images of the two buildings hit by the Boeing airplanes, if not more atrocious, especially when they are mixed with the remains of men, women, and children. There is, however, one difference, namely that those who direct their missiles and bombs to the targets, whether Americans or from another Western country, are mostly targeting by remote controls. That is why they do so as if they were playing an amusing game. As for those who acted on September 11, 2001, they did it from a close range and with, I imagine, giving their lives willingly with an irrevocable determination. For this reason also, the Americans and the world with them should understand the argument that made those peoples give their lives in sacrifice and what they sacrificed themselves for in that way. 1.5 million Iraqi human beings died, according to Western documents, from a population of 25 million because of the American blockade and aggression. It means that Iraq has lost about 1/20 of its population, and just as your beautiful skyscrapers were destroyed and caused you grief, beautiful buildings and precious homes crumbled over their owners in Lebanon, Palestine, and Iraq by American weapons used by Zionists. In only one place, which was a civilian shelter, which is the Amaria shelter, more than 400 human beings, children, young and old men and women died in Iraq by American bombs. In the same day, the 11th of September, one of their aggressive military airplanes was shot down over Iraq. As for what is going on in Palestine, if Zionists let you see on your TVs the bodies of children, women, and men who are daily killed by American weapons, and with American backing to the Zionist entity, the pain you are feeling would be appeased. Americans should feel the pain they have inflicted on other peoples of the world, so as when they suffer, they will find the right solution and the right path. All that has been inflicted on the Arabs and Muslims by America and the West didn't push Muslims to become racist and harass the Westerners who walk in the streets of Baghdad, Damascus, Tunisia, Cairo, and other Arab capitals, even when the Westerners, and especially Americans, insulted the holy sites of Muslims and Arabs by what is almost an occupation of Saudi Arabia in order to launch their evil fires against Baghdad. And when the American carriers roam the Arab Gulf and their fighters daily roam the sky to throw tons of bombs and missiles over Iraq, so that about 200,000 tons of bombs have been used against Iraq, in addition to using the depleted uranium. All these are facts that are very well known, not only to Arabs and Muslims, but to the whole world also. But because of only one incident that happened in America in one day, and upon an unconfirmed accusations, so far Arabs and Muslims, including some who hold the American citizenships, are being harassed openly and publicly in America and some Western countries. Some Western countries are preparing themselves to participate in an American military action against an Islamic country, as the indications point out in the case who is being phonetic. Isn't this solidarity and this in advance approval by some Western leaders of a military aggression against an Islamic country the most flagrant form of the new Crusades fanaticism? It reminds Arabs and Muslims of those Crusades wars launched by the West and NATO against Iraq. Finally, if you rulers respect and cherish the blood of your peoples, why do you find it easy to shed the blood of others, including the blood of Arabs and Muslims? If you respect your values, why don't you respect the values of Arabs and Muslims? America needs wisdom, not power. It has used power along with the West to its extreme extent, only to find out later that it doesn't achieve what they wanted. Will the rulers of America try wisdom just for once, so that their people can live in security and stability? In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, invite all to the way of thy Lord with the wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. For the Lord knoweth best who have strayed from his path and who receive guidance.
U.S. President George Bush announced state of alert in the United States. CNN mentioned that U.S. officials did not roll out new waves of attacks against the United States in the near future. CNN correspondent in the White House added that Bush have asked Canada, France, Germany, Britain, and other states to put an end to terrorism in their states, calling to adopt restricted stances towards Taliban movement in Afghanistan. And Afghani authorities showed its readiness to face up any American possible attack against its territories, especially after the UN evacuation of its employees in Afghanistan. The Afghani authorities' statement followed reports saying that 1.5 million Afghanis might leave their houses due to the American possible aggression over their country.
The Lebanese national resistance called for not allowing the U.S. to carry out its aggressions under the claim to retaliate against the 11th of September attacks on Washington and New York. The resistance statement demanded the Arab nation to quit silence over what is going on in Palestine. It also requested them to practice the utmost level of political and media efforts to face up the upcoming dangers. The United States is carrying on its hysterical procedures to get ready for launching a military aggression against what it names suspects of the 11th of September strike in Washington and New York. In this term, the U.S. President Bush called on all his militants to be ready for sacrifice. In the meantime, the U.S. lawmakers claim that America is still under threat. The latest estimation of New York Mayor Rodolfo Giuliani revealed that 159 persons were killed and other 4,900 are still missing after the jetliner's attack on the World Trade buildings in New York last Tuesday. In the meantime, rescue teams continued their rescue operation for the sixth consecutive day. New York Police Department Chief Officer Bernard Kerik said that thousands are still missing, among them 300 firefighters, 44 harbor workers, 33 policemen, one from the FBI and another from the CIA. A number of mosques and Islamic centers in London were subjected to assaults from a number of racial organization members. These assaults erupted when fingers of accusations concerning the attacks on America were directed to Osama bin Laden, a matter which led the Muslims living in the UK to take precaution measures as an anticipation to probable assaults against Muslims. Earlier, a number of Islamic centers have received messages of threats from right-wing organizations. And finally, Taliban's chief commander Al-Mullah Muhammad Omar called up clergymen in Kabul to discuss the probability of announcing jihad against the United States to reply over a probable attack by the U.S. against Afghani lands. In the wake of the U.S. threats to Afghanistan, thousands of Afghan refugees fled to the Pakistani borders. In the meantime, Afghanistan warned Pakistan from reacting according to the U.S. will by offering facilities to the military attack against Afghanistan. And in another development, the Russian Minister of Defense, Sergei Ivanov, announced today the deploying of a Russian military division near the borders with Afghanistan.
And Vice President Mr. Taha Yassin Ramadan emphasized that America has been defeated in its own soil through the attacks against Washington and New York on Tuesday. Mr. Ramadan said that the explosions which rocked America proved the failure of security, technical, military and intelligence institutions in the U.S. and tore to shreds the false aura with which it was surrounded by the paraphernalia of the media. During his meeting with visiting former Algerian President Mr. Ahmed Ben Bella, Mr. Ramadan said that the U.S. administration have to review and reconsider their policies and to resort to logic and wisdom instead of using juggernaut of war, which America planted in most parts of the world, the seeds of evils, aggression and hegemony on the people's wealth and confiscating their rights in their own territories, and by allying itself with the Zionist entity and by the unlimited support it gives to this entity to deepen its occupational roots on the soil of Palestine. The Vice President affirmed that American and continuing aggression policies against the peoples of the world in all fields will make it liable to fall in the pit of the cliff, because what happened in Washington and in New York is the beginning of the American decline. On his part, Mr. Ben Bella renewed his respect and high regard for the brave and gallant leadership of President Saddam Hussein and Iraq's support of the Palestinian cause. U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney had to admit that the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon caught U.S. officials unawares. These surprise attacks, said Cheney, stressed the necessity of enhancing the level of the intelligence functions. The U.S. Vice President's admission comes at the same time of strengthening military measures in the U.S. and intensifying feverish American threats to declare war on whomever is suspected of participating in the events of last Tuesday. Lebanese media sources said today that 4,000 Zionists working in the World Trade Center didn't go to their works on the day of the attack last Tuesday. In response to the Zionist government call, the matter that raised the doubts among the American officials who wanted to know how the Zionists were able to know the news of the attacks before they took place. The sources added, quoting an Arab sources in Jordan, saying that none of the Zionists or the American Jews got hurt despite the large number of them working in the center. Meanwhile, FBI agents detained last week 5 Zionists who are working in transportation firms owned by a Zionist in New Jersey near New York for suspecting them of being related to the explosions that rocked the World Trade Center in New York last Tuesday. And finally, a high-level Pakistani delegation met in Kandahar in Afghanistan today with the high officials in Taliban movement, among them Taliban's Foreign Minister Wakil Ahmed Mutawakkil, to discuss American threats in Afghanistan. The Pakistani delegation, which includes officials from foreign interior ministries in addition to intelligence representatives, focused its discussion on trying to persuade Taliban movement to hand over the Saudi billionaire Osama bin Laden, who is considered by Washington the first and foremost culprit of the series of attacks on Washington and New York. Because of the insistence of Taliban not to hand over bin Laden, the Pakistani armed forces were put at the highest level of alert in anticipation of events that might take place. Well, that's all for tonight. Thanks for joining me, and good night.
يا جبهة الشمس للوجود